The last type of price floor we're going to investigate, we investigated the minimum wage as a price floor, common price floor in the last video. In this video, we're going to investigate the other common type of price floor, and that is an agricultural price support. Okay, now like a minimum wage, the argument would go is that it's there to protect the employee. Now, obviously, the employees who keep their jobs benefit from a higher minimum wage, but those who lose their jobs, I don't think you could argue they're better off than they used to be. Well, an agricultural price support is there to protect the agricultural industry. In other words, the government thinks that the current price per bushel of wheat, for instance, is too low. And if that's all the farmers are paid, farmers will go out of business. And so they step in, support the price level in the market in order to be able to pay the farmers more money to keep them from going out of business. So let's look at, say, a market for some agricultural product. Okay, so it's got a demand and it's got a supply. Okay, now so the government thinks that the current market price, say per bushel wheat or corn or whatever, is too low, and if a farmer relies on that, there would be some farmers going out of business. So they step in and put in a price floor, an agricultural price support. Um, uh, some price floor. Now, don't get this F confused with the F in the full economic price of a price ceiling. This is a little f, so this stands for price floor, not full economic price. So the government steps in and supports the price, okay? Forces everyone to pay no less than PF per bushel to keep the farmers employed and to keep them happy. Now, so how much would be produced at this price floor price? Well, we can see that it would be the quantity supplied at that price. Okay, so QS units of the product would be produced. Okay, how much of the product would be demanded, however, at that price? I kind of drew my graph a little shrunk here, probably shouldn't have, but we'll deal with it. How much would the private sector purchase of that product at the price floor price? Well, that would be the quantity traded on the private sector market, or as we also know, it would be the quantity demanded at that price floor price. So the revenue generated, the revenue paid to the farmer in this market from the private sector would be the price floor price times the quantity demanded by the private sector. Okay, it would be equal to this amount here. Okay, now, but the farmer is actually getting the price floor price times the quantity supplied of the products, because that's the entire point, right? In other words, the farmer has an incentive to overproduce the product. Okay, now the government typically won't deal with that overproduction. So what they'll actually do is they will subsidize the farmer the difference in order to and tell the farmer not to overproduce. In other words, they will pay the farmer money not to plant so much of the crop. That amount there is the subsidy that would be directly paid to the farmer to encourage them not to plant so much of the crop, because again, otherwise there would be a surplus of the product. The quantity supplied would exceed the quantity demanded of the product. The private sector can only support that much product at that high of a price, and so the farmer would have to be compensated for the rest in order not to produce that surplus good, because what's the government going to do with extra product? Okay, so the government has to come up with this subsidy. Now, of course, the taxpayer funds the government, meaning that it's the taxpayer that pays this subsidy. Okay, now we can already see where this is going. It gets a little complicated here, but where is consumer surplus then? Well, consumer surplus is going to be this area up here, of course. Now, producer surplus is actually this entire area. That's producer surplus, okay? Is this area here is producer surplus. Okay, remember the boundedness conditions. Bounded above by the price the producer gets, bounded below by supply, and bounded on the right by the quantity that the producer trades, which in this case would be the quantity they supply. Okay, and the which would be the quantity they would normally supply at that price. It's just that the government actually pays them a subsidy not to produce that much. They actually only produce QD. Where does this lead us? Well, this leads us to a substantial amount of deadweight loss. Okay, and what exists in that deadweight loss? Well, that deadweight loss is explained by the fact that now all the consumers have to pay, not only have to pay a higher price for their products. So, this is the cotton industry. Not only does everybody have to pay more for their underwear and their blue jeans, but they also have higher taxes to pay for the subsidy to keep the farmer from going bankrupt. Okay, that's included in that deadweight loss. So the bottom line is total surplus would have been this area here. Okay, now you can obviously see consumer surplus has shrunk from what it normally would have been had the market been allowed to clear. Producer surplus has grown, so the government has been successful in shifting some of that total surplus over to the producer, but there is a sizable deadweight loss here that one has to contend with, okay? And you also have to contend with higher taxes. The consumer also has to contend with a higher price for the product, okay? All this combined then leads us to say that this is an inefficient outcome. We would generally think that this deadweight loss would exceed the additional surplus that the producer gets, okay, from this price support program. And as long as that deadweight loss is larger than that additional surplus the farmer gets, then the outcome is an inefficient outcome, okay? Regardless of the higher price that the consumer has to pay for the product and the higher taxes they will have to that they will incur.